Great, it wasn't recording. So I was touching upon a topic when it came to. Ay, qué maldita mierda. De mamá huevo. He's such a fucking idiot. Laughing like a fucking faggot, like a fucking idiot. Um, eh, fuck, I can't believe this shit was never fucking recorded, man. Alright. Everybody keeps talking about the prophecies and the prophetic things, which is really important nowadays, but everybody touched upon a hypothesis of which how far would God let technology go when it comes to AI? Now, so far, the things, the way it's being projected, it seems like we're at a standpoint where, now this is hypothetically speaking, uh, where not the end goal, but part of the one of the main goals is to copy people's subconscious and to put inside of a humanoid or an android. Same thing. Um, Now, if we're gonna go into the very startup of the beginning of the AI, the AI was it's running on a quantum computer, in which runs, I believe, 1.5 million times way much more faster than the fastest supercomputer, which is a Capitan. If not, I think it is 15 million, but it doesn't really freaking matter. It doesn't really matter because in comparison to the new Google CPU of the quantum computer, it currently runs 241 million times way much more faster than the current one. So that's going to be really interesting in a couple months as it's being implemented. Um, but for that matter, my the basic the focus is that ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI. So OpenAI also owns Neuralink. Neuralink is a project where they install chips on chimps' brains, and now it's being installed in human brains, where you could control the computer, lighting, IoT devices with your mind without having to use your hands. Now, this is mainly for the people that are, uh, is it quadriplegic? Well, people that are disabled. They can't move, and they need that assistance through technology. And currently, right now, the way that they're using it, it's only for the sake of clicking things, turning on and off lights and stuff like that. But the way I'm foreseeing this so far is is that they'll get to a point where they'll read, they'll put the sensor, the neural link to read um, the brain patterns when it comes to, let's say, for instance, somebody learning to do something new. They'll learn the process at which the person learns that process, and then they'll copy and they'll um, statistically compare it to other people to see where in the brain is that being triggered and where is it being restored. And if they record that pattern, they could easily start downloading that same pattern into a neural connection through synapses of procreating new neurons in the process. Now that's gonna be interesting. I really don't know how they're gonna pull that off when it comes to creating new neurons in the process of learning new things. I would think that it could be an effect of implanting something that could affect your subconscious, where you're training your subconscious of learning something without you being aware of you learning something. And then when it comes to you actually getting into the practice of doing that thing, that you already have it installed in your brain, and that's how you're going to carry on with life. Now, if you're actually going to go into the scripture in part, God says that, He said when it comes to the apple, not to consume the forbidden fruit, because the forbidden fruit is the sin, right? It was the one mandate that God told Adam not to consume. Now, what the enemy said when he were to consume that is that it'll give you knowledge and intelligence. Now, when it came to the knowledge and intelligence, the biggest problem about, apart from the fact that disobedience, is that by becoming independent from God, by having the knowledge and intelligence, you are no longer abiding with God, and you want to be more independent instead of being dependent by God. That's what God wants us to be, within His umbrella and between within His guidance. And so, uh, when it comes to the knowledge itself, when it comes to Apple really hit it right in the head. This was intentional. This device, the internet, the computing, the technology, all of it, its purpose is to be knowledgeable, intelligible, and to be independent by God. The purpose, obviously, intelligence is great and all, but, that's not what exactly God intended us to do. He wanted us to be not exactly dumb, but to be dependent to God. And so, when it comes to that, um, the enemy, apart from the fact of, giving us these, I don't even want to go there. That's I don't know. That's demonic. So the thing is that the enemy wants to copy everything that God has created, right? Um, let's say for example, like God's lucky number seven. I mean God's favorite number, like 777. The enemy's is 666. Um, the enemy wants to copy every little thing that God does for his instruments. Yo reprendo ya los espíritus. He wants to copy everything of God, right? And so when it comes to that, he when it comes to technology though, when it comes to human beings, this progression of technology is the process and byproduct of not just human revolution, but also a movement of the enemy as well. Because if we actually go into the low level kernel, everything about computing, if you actually get into it, especially with the Linux, they have, people don't know this, but there's different levels of layers of computing. You got the kernel, which is the software that communicates with the hardware of the computer. And then you got the operating system that runs on top of it, that runs on top of the kernel in order to have the communication from the hardware, from the software to the hardware, which is the firmware of the of the BIOS of the motherboard. In part, it's part in mixed in with the operating system as well. Um, the BIOS is just the firmware of the motherboard. The kernel is the lower level of the operating system, and then it sits the operating system, whether that's going to be Linux or Windows, right above that in order to communicate with the hardware of the PC. Now, when it comes to the Windows operating system itself, or just any operating system, especially when it comes to the Linux side, the way they called the services within the operating systems, they're called daemons. So the demons, and it's not exactly spelled as demons, Demons. It's more diamonds. It's Deamons, to represent how these computers work. And it's kind of like a mockery of how people, in a way, work when it comes to life. It so these services, they run in the background as the computer is running without the user being aware that it is running. So that's the funny side and aspect when it comes to computing. So if we carry on when it comes to computing itself and in the future and getting into the point of AI and using humanoids and stuff like that in people's subconscious, the way I'm seeing this as that the enemy may want to, again, for the human revolution's sake, they want to, let's say for instance, this is really smart neuro surgeon. There's very few like him in the earth, and so this guy is of age. He's about to pass away. And what are they gonna do? They will, if they if the technology does exist, they will replicate his brain, his consciousness into a humanoid in order to replicate and to continue learning from his examples and practices for machine learning, AI, and or just to utilize him as a tool. Um, but when it comes to that though, when it comes to installing new practices, installing new habits, installing uh, intelligence into your brain through these neural links. Again, this is, I would say, 5 years from now. If I'm pretty sure, like around 5 years, it'll probably occur. Um, one of the biggest problem is, I mean, I would say 5 to 10 years. I wouldn't exactly call it out 5 years. I would say 5 to 10 years, something like that. They'll probably get tampering into finding a way to install um, new practices. Even if they are already, I'm not sure exactly what the current state is of Neuralink right now, but that's just a thought. So what I'm trying to say is that that's been 10 minutes. Um, if right now so far we are at the point where if the enemy is trying to tamper with our brains through temptations and sins and things, through addictions and sorts, and this is of in part the enemy, this technology here, um, again, we use it as a tool. We leverage it, we use it for good and bad. Um, but in part, its very essence goes back to the same roots of Adam and Eve. Um, Because we need to survive and we need to create and we need to grow and we need to live, we need to evolve. We're just not as dependent of God as we used to, as we should have, kind of like in the times of Adam and Eve. So when it comes to that, um, damn, something is trying to wipe me out though, and it really sucks. So imagine being targeted by thoughts and temptations and addictions to commit sin, right? But another thing is implanting things in your brain and having a direct contact of the enemy through computing power to your brain. So no longer does the enemy have to put fear in you in order to cause your character to break, your foundation, your building, your home to break by subduing you through fear and pain and then trying to indoctrinate you to a different mindset because of lack of sense of security and sense of confidence and lack of self-love. Therefore, it brings about all these demonic sins and addictions and all these problems. He could just easily try to install things in your brain without you even noticing while you're sleeping if you have one of those things installed in your brain. So, in my thought and hypothesis on this, it is probable that God will not wait to that point to happen. So when it comes to the prophecies themselves, yeah, a lot of the prophecies are occurring. But when it comes to the technology standpoint and for what how things are going so far, I'm pretty sure Christ might just come back before even that kind of stuff happens. Now, this is a complete different topic. Not everybody's gonna be into this kind of stuff, uh, which is actually life and the beginning and end of life itself. Um, Again, if we actually go into the details when it comes to generations, where the next generation is Generation Alpha, and God is Alpha and Omega. Maybe that's the message for Omega to come by. He's not gonna go through the whole Greek alphabet. He's gonna do a shortcut, right? Because the way things are going so far, it's just not gonna let happen all this stuff to occur. So yeah, that was. Let me see. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you guys think about this? Is it too much? Um, and yeah, this is just a brain dump of some of the thoughts that I've had so far when it comes to technology and how far would it go and how far would God let it go to occur before it actually affects us instead of just helping us, but instead impeding us from continuing to be humane and not inhumane and living in a mindset of logic and not exactly vibing, not exactly living, not exactly having a soul, given that a lot of the things that would occur, our mindsets in the future would be more into the logic side if this kind of plantation, implant, implants, integration occurs in our lives. All right, that's all. Until next time.